The downfall of Mayor Tiffany Henyard was nothing short of cinematic: emails, covert recordings, and a courtroom filled with journalists, residents, and legal teams. Her carefully constructed public image collapsed under the weight of damning evidence, bribes, secret deals, and reckless spending of taxpayer funds. Once hailed as the unstoppable supermayor of Dolton and the powerhouse of Thornton Township, Henyard's confident, untouchable persona cracked wide open. Her face, once displayed proudly on billboards as a beacon of progress, now looked pale and hollow under courtroom lights. Prosecutors methodically revealed damning financial trails, padded salaries, shopping sprees on the public dime, and desperate attempts to silence whistleblowers. The evidence was explosive, and the silence in the courtroom was deafening. Long-time supporters who once believed in her sat frozen in disbelief. Then the silence shattered. In a flash of rage, Henyard slammed her fist on the table, her chair screeching behind her. Standing with a trembling voice and fire in her eyes, she shouted, "This is a setup!" The courtroom gasped. She pointed at the prosecution, accusing them of targeting her because she was a strong woman. But the irony was heavy. This was the same woman accused of bullying employees and abusing public funds. In a desperate attempt to regain control, she turned on her own legal team. "You were supposed to fix this," she spat. One attorney fumbled with papers, clearly shaken, while the other avoided her stare altogether. For the first time in her career, Henyard had no control, no prepared script, and no way out. The truth had finally trapped her, and it was closing in fast. Then came the moment that would flood headlines across the country. Seething with anger, Henyard grabbed her designer handbag, tore off her mic, and stormed out of the courtroom. The room erupted, reporters stood up, cameras flashed, and court officers tried to regain order. Residents, finally seeing accountability, clapped. Outside, the atmosphere buzzed with energy. Henyard's heels clicked sharply as she descended the courthouse steps, surrounded by security. Reporters swarmed, shouting over each other. "Any comment on the leaked tapes? Are millions of public dollars missing? Will you resign?" But Henyard said nothing. Her jaw was tight, her gaze fixed forward. The polished politician had vanished. This was a cornered woman, seconds away from breaking. Just before reaching her black SUV, a voice pierced through the crowd. "You think you can run now, Tiffany?" A woman stepped into view. It was Dolton's former treasurer. Once silent, now defiant, she had resigned months earlier over Henyard's shady dealings. Back then, Henyard dismissed her as bitter. But today that woman stood tall with a truth too big to ignore. "You silenced us all," she said, voice calm but razor sharp. "But you can't outrun the truth." Henyard stopped cold. She didn't yell or move. The once mighty mayor looked powerless, small, exposed. Cameras zoomed in. Reporters leaned closer. In that quiet, piercing moment, the story was no longer about power, politics, or scandal. It was about reckoning. And Henyard was finally facing hers. Inside the courtroom, chaos simmered just beneath the surface. Henyard's inner circle sat frozen, their phones buzzing nonstop as panic whispered through the air. Staffers exchanged worried glances. No one had a plan. Their leader had stormed out, abandoning them in the middle of the storm. Some scrambled to draft statements, others quietly slipped away, hoping not to get pulled into the fallout. Just days earlier, Henyard had taken to Facebook Live in a furious rant, claiming she was being targeted for being a strong black woman who dared to lead. She called it a smear campaign, saying the system feared her power. But the performance backfired. The media labeled it a meltdown, while community voices called it manipulative and tone-deaf. Even her loyal followers were beginning to lose faith. What was left was a painful contrast, an origin story built on inspiration, now buried beneath scandal. Henyard had once been seen as a bold visionary, a fierce agent of change. But somewhere along the way, that promise turned into arrogance. Bullying, secrecy, and reckless spending became trademarks of her administration. The transformation from trailblazer to tyrant was complete. Millions in public funds had disappeared. Promised projects never materialized. Instead, top aides saw their salaries swell while community services suffered. With an FBI probe intensifying and the threat of charges looming, the weight of corruption was crushing her political empire. The control she once had, crafted carefully through charm and spin, was slipping through her fingers fast. Still, Henyard kept performing. In interviews, she dodged questions. At public events, she played the aggressor. But the mask was cracking, and the people of Dolton were watching. Outside the courthouse, the confrontation with the former treasurer ended abruptly. Henyard shoved past her, climbed into her SUV, and slammed the door shut. But not before someone in the crowd yelled, "This is what happens when you steal from the people." The SUV tore off, flashing lights trailing behind, while a flood of unanswered questions lingered in her wake. Back inside, the courtroom slowly emptied. Journalists filed their stories. Neighbors exchanged quiet glances of disbelief. There was no applause, no celebration, just the echo of betrayal. The Tiffany Henyard era wasn't closing with cheers. It was closing as a cautionary tale. Then came one last moment, a final act of reckless bravado. Frozen in place, Henyard turned back toward the treasurer. With venom in her voice, she leaned in close, her whisper sharp and threatening. But she miscalculated. This wasn't a private moment. It was being recorded. The treasurer didn't back down. She turned to the cameras, smirked, and declared loud enough for the world to hear, "You heard that, right? She just threatened me." Social media detonated like a bomb. Hashtags stormed across timelines. Henyard exposed. Dalton deserves better. What was once local scandal had gone global. The iron-fisted mayor, who curated every image, controlled every headline, was unraveling before a live audience. Inside the courthouse, the hearing continued without her. And without her presence, the secrecy shattered. The prosecution seized its moment. The lead prosecutor rose, voice steady, words heavy. "Your Honor, we've uncovered over $30 million in questionable financial activity." The room froze. Gasps rippled through the crowd. This wasn't mismanagement. This was criminal embezzlement. Fake vendors, shell companies, phantom consultants. Then came the gut punch. Most of the funds had been laundered into out-of-state luxury real estate. Schools, roads, public safety, robbed blind. The whispers turned into stunned murmurs as names connected to the assets were read aloud. Trusted. Aides, senior staffers. Even Henyard's elusive boyfriend, missing from public view for weeks, was directly tied to the properties. The courtroom transformed into a crime scene. This wasn't disorganized theft. It was structured, intentional, a conspiracy. And the architect? Gone. Silent. Missing in action, the judge's gavel struck like a thunderclap. In calm, chilling tones, he authorized a full-blown federal criminal investigation into Tiffany Henyard's financial conduct. The murmurs became gasps, then cheers. What had once been dismissed as political noise was now fact, documented in black and white. The legal wall was closing in, and fast. Outside, the dam of public frustration burst open. A wave of chants surged through the crowd. "Lock her up!" "She played us!" People wept. Some embraced. Others raised fists skyward. After years of being silenced, manipulated, and dismissed, this felt like vindication. Justice was no longer a fantasy. It was unfolding in real time. Meanwhile, just a few blocks away, Tiffany Henyard sat in her SUV, completely unaware of the legal firestorm consuming the courthouse. Still clinging to delusion, she believed the spin could work. Play. The victim claim oppression, cry systemic bias. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Alerts, news breaks, missed calls. She ignored them all until a familiar name appeared, her top advisor. She answered with one word. "What?" The voice on the other end was trembling. "Madam Mayor, it's bad, really bad." Her pulse quickened. Then came the words that froze her blood. "They're coming after you." In that moment, the weight of it all crashed down. This wasn't politics anymore. It was criminal. No slogan could save her now. She sat still, phone pressed to her ear. The leaks, the evidence, the rumors, the betrayal. It was all true. The empire she'd ruled with fear and flair was crumbling in silence. Inside the courthouse, the judge's ruling had confirmed what many feared and what others prayed for. The criminal investigation was underway, and outside, the celebration had begun. For Dalton, this wasn't just justice, it was liberation. But the storm wasn't done. One final twist shattered any last defense. A whistleblower stepped into the spotlight. Live on TV, a woman, shaking but resolute, spoke out. "I worked there for years," she began. "I watched the money vanish. And when I asked questions, I was threatened." The interviewer leaned in. Threatened by who? The answer was written on her face. With trembling fingers, the whistleblower held up a small device, a digital recorder. The audio, long rumored, long denied, was real and devastating. Henyard's own voice, her own threats, her own words used to intimidate silence. The final nail hadn't come from outside. It came from within. On live TV, the empire officially died. Back in the courtroom, the prosecution moved fast. With the whistleblower's recording now viral, they filed a motion to expand the investigation. The judge didn't hesitate. Approved. Instantly. The air inside the courtroom shifted, equal parts shock and catharsis. For the citizens of Dalton, long bullied into silence, this wasn't just a legal development. It was long overdue vindication. Outside, the crowd's voice rose, like a tidal wave. Chants thundered. Signs shook in the air. Some people broke down in tears. Others erupted in raw celebration. The justice they'd been told would never come was finally here. But no one was prepared for what happened next. The first arrest. Not Tiffany Henyard. Not yet. It was her chief financial advisor, the man who'd handled millions. The fall had begun. The arrest was swift and very public. Handcuffs in broad daylight, news cameras rolling, symbolic, strategic, and chilling. Everyone knew. More were coming. Then the headline dropped like a hammer. The FBI was officially involved. This was no longer a small-town scandal. It was a full-blown federal case. Subpoenas were flying. Accounts were frozen. Allies were flipping. Henyard's reality had changed forever. In a cold panic, she turned to her lawyer, her voice cut like glass. "Fix this." But he didn't respond. No words. No comfort. Just a blank stare. And in that silence, she heard the truth louder than any courtroom ruling. There was no fixing this. Her reign was over. The woman who once ruled Dalton through fear and manipulation was no longer a mayor. She was a target. Outside, the chants turned into roars. Her name echoed through the streets, not in praise, but in mockery. The same name once printed on buses, banners, and village brochures had become a cautionary tale. A name whispered in disgust. She sat frozen in her SUV, the same vehicle she once rode in like royalty. Now it felt like a cage. The powerful were now powerless. This was no mere PR disaster. It was annihilation. And the investigation? It was just getting started. The FBI wasn't playing politics. They were gutting her operation from the inside. Every shady deal, every threat, every backroom payoff, all being traced, analyzed, and weaponized. Former loyalists were flipping, turning state's witness. Henyard wasn't just under fire. She was surrounded. Now only one question gripped everyone's mind. Would she flip? Would she strike a deal? Or would she try something desperate? Some final move to save her empire or herself? No one knew. But everyone was watching. Dalton was watching. The country was watching. And this time, there was no script, no spin, no carefully curated photo ops. The reckoning had arrived. And justice? It wasn't knocking anymore. It was already inside the house.